So this is a story about a priest who was at the wrong place at the wrong time. So there's this priest, he was kind of a city guy, he lived in the city all his life. And he got reassigned to a rural parish. So he was known for two things. Number one, he gave these beautiful, beautiful funeral homilies. Two, he played the bagpipes. So at the funerals, he would play Amazing Grace. Well, he gets reassigned, gets all his stuff in his car, and heads north into the woods. He doesn't even get out of the car. He gets to a new place, doesn't even get out of the car, and the church secretary comes running up. Father, our pastor is out. We need a graveside service. Can you do it? He says, I just got here. I don't even know my way around. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going. He says, well, I got directions. You got 35 minutes to get there. It should be plenty of time. He said, all right, I'll go. So he gets the directions. He's driving. And it's been 15 minutes. And it's been 20 minutes. 35 minutes, he's still not there. 45 minutes, he's still not there. Finally, almost an hour goes by, and he's on the right road, and he's driving, and he looks to where he thinks he should be, and there's a backhoe there with a bunch of guys sitting around it and a hole in the ground. He's like, that's got to be it. So he goes up, and he looks in there, and all I can see is the cement top of the grave vault. And he says, I'm too late. But I'm here. I'm going to do what I came to do. So he starts giving this homily. Now, the guys at the backhoe, they're eating lunch. They stop eating lunch, and they're listening. And they're listening intently. And then he finishes the homily, and he breaks out the bagpipes. The guys stand up. They take their hats off. They're tearing up. He finishes the bagpipes, finishes Amazing Grace. The foreman comes over and says, Father, I'm not even a Catholic, but that was incredible. I mean, I have never seen anything like that in my life, and I've been putting in septic tanks for 27 years. So, just as there's an inspired story about Dr. Miller, there's also an inspired story about Trevor Polo. But he was in the right place at the right time. So way back in the spring of 2019, Steve sends me a video, or an email, with a link to a video on YouTube. He says, I'm thinking about this guy as a speaker, and I'm checking with him on his availability. What do you think? So I watched the video, and I said, to myself, I like him. He's articulate, he's passionate, he's got a good message. I'll take it to prayer. So next day I went to church. And going to church, where I go to church, it's a tiny, tiny little town called Memphis. I don't know if anybody has even heard of it. Okay, some of you have. So it's a tiny town. We got two streets in Memphis, Main and not Main, and that's all we got. I mean, the welcome to and the come again sign are on the same post. It's that small. So as I'm walking up the sidewalk, there's a table there, and they're handing out pamphlets. And I grabbed the pamphlet from the guy. It was a pro-life pamphlet, and I look up, and I said, you're Trevor Polo. He says, yes, I am. I said, you're not going to believe this. I says, I'm John Kowalski. I'm part of the Midwest Apologetics Conference. I work with Steve Piskorowski, and we're thinking of having you into the conference. He says, Steve Piskorowski? He says, I got an email from that guy. He says, Trevor, this is not an accident. The Holy Spirit brought this together. You will be at that conference in February. So, Trevor Polo is the director of training for Protect Life Michigan. He's made over 100 college campus visits, bringing the pro-life message to both friendly and not so friendly crowds sometimes. He's trained thousands of students and pro-life leaders in apologetics and leadership with a focus on offering a passionate, logical, and reasonable defense against the injustice of abortion. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our second speaker, handpicked, no less, by the Holy Spirit, Mr. Trevor Polo.
All right, thank you guys for having me out. My name is Trevor, and I'm the Director of Training for Protect Life Michigan. We are a statewide organization that works with about 50 high school and college groups across the state of Michigan, equipping students to bring the pro-life message to a hostile crowd. The way that our staff does that, we have 10 staff members across the state, is by recruiting pro-life students and then activating them to do activism on their college campuses. The way I specifically do that is by training those students in pro-life apologetics and doing a tour across the state called Stump the Pro-Lifer. This event is where we go out, we invite groups and students that we're pretty sure don't like me at all, and we plaster the campus with pictures of my face, which gets people upset because I happen to be a white man talking about abortion. And we say, just come out, ask your toughest questions, stump the pro-lifer, embarrass me, make me look foolish, lead me out of the campus in shame, right? And they come in and we present this logical, reasonable, scientific defense of the pro-life position, and then we just let them ask their questions. We let them ask those challenges that they've been wanting to ask for so long, whether they're somewhere in the middle or radically pro-choice. We give them the opportunity to engage in productive dialogue that isn't like what you see on Facebook or Twitter, where people are name-calling and yelling and seeing who can yell louder to win. And what we see is that some of these events where we might have anywhere from 25 to 100 pro-choice students show up, we see up to about 30% of those pro-choice students leaving pro-life. And it's because we have the truth. So I love my job because I get to see that happen all the time. Weekly, we get to see people's hearts and minds changed on this issue. I also love my job because I like to argue. I like debating. It's fun. It makes for some difficulties sometimes at home because I like to argue, but sometimes when it's on the college campus, it's great. And that really is motivating for me. I like the debate, I like the philosophy, I like learning, and I like learning from people that disagree with me. However, that's not really why I do this. You see, the thing that really motivates me is some of the stories that I hear. And some of the stories that I hear are sometimes funny, sometimes emotional, and sometimes really, really difficult to hear. And recently, about 6 months ago, I heard a story that's kind of been the motivation for me to do even more than I have in the past because of how much it impacted me. And I go around to college campuses and I share this story because I think it puts into perspective what we are supposed to be doing, what we are called to be doing in this movement. And the story comes from a friend of mine. His name is Jonathan. He lives in Toronto, and he's very active in the pro-life movement in Canada. And he goes to churches like this pretty often and speaks on the pro-life issue all across Canada and in the United States. And one day he was doing this, a normal Sunday, giving that pro-life message, trying to engage the church in the movement. And after the event, this older gentleman came up and started talking to him. And he said, "Jonathan, I need to show you something," which isn't terribly unusual. And Jonathan says, "Okay, what is it?" And this gentleman walks with Jonathan out of the sanctuary and into the parking lot, into this man's car. And if you live in Canada and you're giving the pro-life message, you know it's not a friendly audience all the time. So Jonathan should be a little concerned that this man is leading into his car, but what he's following him, right? And the man says, "Jonathan, can you get in my car?" So, uh-oh. But Jonathan goes, I don't know what was going through his mind, but he gets in the car and they drive away. They pull into a driveway of this man's house. And red flags should be going off, and that'd be the end of the road for me. It'd be like, "Thank you, can you take me back, please?" Right? But Jonathan's a different guy, and he walks into the house with this man. Man takes him through the kitchen, he gets him to the back door, he opens the door to the garage and ushers Jonathan in. And again, red flags should be going off, but for whatever reason, Jonathan walks right in. And Jonathan's kind of taking in his surroundings a little bit, probably trying to memorize the exit routes and descriptions and everything, just in case. And this man is shuffling through some boxes on a shelf. And after a few moments, this man turns around, and Jonathan describes what happens next. Jonathan says he felt the blood drain from his face, and he went white. He was afraid he wouldn't be able to stand. His feet became like lead. He couldn't move. And this man was approaching him. And in this man's hand was a jar about yay big. And in that jar was a little boy. And this man hands this jar to Jonathan, and Jonathan describes how, I'm sure many of you have probably experienced this kind of like sensory memory where even more than the sight of something, you might remember the way something feels or tastes or smells, that memory there. And he describes more than seeing that jar, he describes the feeling of holding that jar and feeling the little boy's head bump against the glass, or his feet touch the bottom of the jar in his hand. And his mind couldn't understand, as he was looking at this jar, he's looking at this little boy in a jar, he couldn't understand why he wouldn't open his eyes. Like he should just wake up. And he keeps looking at it intently. And the little boy kind of turns within the liquid, and he sees the puncture wound in the back of his head. And at that point, Jonathan couldn't do it. He set the jar down on a counter in the garage. And when he did, he saw on the top of it this label, this white label, kind of like a name tag. And on it, it had the name of a facility, a clinic, and the name of a doctor. And at that moment, Jonathan realized the only thing that we know about this little boy in a jar, in a box, in a garage in Toronto, Ontario, is where he died and who killed him. We don't know his name, we don't know his family, we don't know what circumstances led up to that. We don't know what he would have grown up to be. We don't even know where he's from. There's a boy in a jar, we know who killed him and where he died. And at that moment, he realized there is no one more orphaned than that little boy. And as a faithful person, that motivates him. If we are to be caring for the widows and the orphans, who is more deserving of our care and who is more deserving of our protection than that little boy and the thousands and millions of other little boys and little girls who find themselves in the same situation? So when we talk about apologetics, it can be super interesting. And you're going to learn potentially about some really kind of funny thought experiments. You're going to feel empowered to go argue and debate and really engage in this issue. But I want to make sure that we don't lose perspective in the process. And that it's not good enough for you to be like, oh, I feel comfortable now in my beliefs. We have a calling to go and take that belief, that foundation that you're built on, and go out and engage with those that don't agree with us. Engage with those that are contemplating this decision today. And the longer we wait, the minutes that we let pass by, lives are being lost. And there's babies in jars and garages in Ontario that people didn't speak up for and are not with us now because of it. So what I want to do is help equip you with some ideas on how you can engage with this issue so that we can have less babies dying, so that we can engage with those that disagree with us and change their hearts and change their minds on this issue so that we can ultimately save lives. So how do we do that? Well, if we talk about pro-life apologetics, our mind often gets a little bit overwhelmed. And I think that's natural because when we hear about the issue of abortion, and when I talk about it on college campuses, people's minds go to so many topics. It's so complex because we think of politics and we think of history and we think of gender roles and we think of economics and science and biology and religion, All these topics that are so complex in and of themselves that we think, I'm not an expert in any one of these, let alone all of them, so how could I possibly be prepared enough to speak on this issue? And we let that fear turn us into silence. So what I want to do is simplify this for everyone. The issue of abortion is actually remarkably simple. It comes down to 3 really simple points. Point 1, it is wrong to intentionally take the life of an innocent human being. That's my first premise. It's wrong to intentionally kill innocent people. And like John said, I've been to a lot of college campuses, I've talked to a lot of people, and yet have I had anyone seriously challenge that premise. There's not very many people who will stand up in a crowd like this and say, actually, Trevor, I disagree, it is okay to kill innocent people. I do it all the time. I feel good about it. I did it last weekend. No one's going to do that because no one is unaware of society's acceptance throughout all of time and space that killing innocent lives is wrong. And those that do it are not representative of the morality of society, but are the exceptions in society and should be treated that way. Don't take innocent human life. Premise 2. Abortion intentionally takes the life of an innocent human being. So if your mind's kind of turning now, you're probably recognizing that must be the issue. That must be where the debate lies. Because if we just agree that it is wrong to intentionally take the life of an innocent human being, and abortion in premise 2, in fact, does do that very thing, then our conclusion must be that abortion is wrong. It is wrong to intentionally kill. Abortion does. Therefore, abortion is wrong. So all this talk of the complexity of this issue, all these different topics and things that might be related to, really comes down to one question. Does abortion intentionally take the life of an innocent human being or not? If it does, it is wrong. If it does not, then it's no different than getting your hair cut or clipping your fingernails. Maybe some human cells may die in the process, but a life is not lost. Therefore, it is morally permissible. So my job when I go to those college campuses is to defend premise 2. Abortion takes the life of an innocent human being intentionally. Their job, if they disagree with me, is to attack premise 2. Abortion does not do that thing, or there's something else out there that kind of just clarifies the whole argument, some premise 2.5 that clarifies it. And that's where we focus, and that's where we have to stay focused. We have to be the disciplined ones that don't follow every rabbit trail before we answer that very question. So, how do we defend premise 2? It starts with asking the key question of the entire abortion debate. If there's anything you walk away with today, it should be remembering this key question. What is the unborn? Because before you answer whether or not it's okay to kill it, before you answer whether or not you even are killing it in an abortion, you need to define what it is. And there's this analogy that's commonly used, and it says, imagine tonight you guys all go home, and you're at your kitchen sink. You're doing dishes. You're looking out your back window in your backyard, and behind you comes your son or maybe grandson or granddaughter. They come up behind you and they say, "Mommy, Daddy, can I kill this?" And your back is to them, so you don't know what they're holding. You have a choice to make. Option 1, without turning around or asking any additional questions, you can say, "Yes, go ahead, kill whatever it is it may be." You turn around a few moments later, to your horror, they have the neighbor's cat in their hand and they are strangling it. Red flag, early sign of serial killer. We gotta do something, right? Because you can't kill your neighbor's cat. So instead of giving that permission, you ask a really important question. Well, what is it? What do you have? Because if you're holding a spider, go ahead, do it, like get it out of here, right? If you're holding a cat, no. Worse yet, you're holding your little sibling? Absolutely not. Don't kill your little brother, right? The answer to the question, what is it, impacts the answer you're going to provide to whether or not you can kill it. How often, when we're making an argument on abortion, is that ever answered? Very rarely. Very rarely does anyone ask the question, well, what exactly is the unborn? And let's engage on that first. That's what we need to ask. That is the key question. So, what is the unborn? That question is not a philosophical question. It's not a religious question. What something is a pretty scientific question to answer. What species does it belong to? Is it alive? Is it not? We turn to the field of biology or embryology, specifically in this case. And the first thing we see is that the unborn are alive. Meaning from the moment of conception, they display the undeniable signs of biological life. For example, they grow. Dead things don't get bigger. 2, they have a metabolism. They're consuming energy. And 3, they're reproducing at a cellular level, potentially even twinning up to a certain point. They're reproducing, they have a metabolism, and they are growing. Biologically, they are undeniably living. And then we say, well, it's not enough that they're just living. Are they human or not? Do they have the potential to be a human? Or are they, at that moment, human? And once again, that is a scientific question to ask. Because what species something belongs to is not something that we debate in philosophy classes. What species something belongs to is determined by the DNA of that organism. From the moment of conception, the unborn has a full, unique, complete set of human DNA. It is not the DNA of a cat or a dog or a fish. It is human DNA. It belongs to our species. So scientifically speaking, conception occurs and we now have a living human being. And as the pro-choice arguments have evolved over the past several decades, they've generally accepted that at this point. The technology has advanced, the science has advanced enough that they're going to probably agree, yeah, the unborn are alive, and yeah, they belong to our species. They are human, living human beings. And for us, we're like, awesome, like we agree then. Like abortion's wrong then, right? Because it intentionally kills a living human being, right? And they'll say, well, no, not quite. And they came up with this kind of dichotomy. There's 2 types of human beings, they'll say. There are human persons, and there are human non-persons. And that sounds odd to most of us, as it probably should, because we generally use those terms interchangeably. I wasn't watching all of you walk in today trying to guess which one of you are persons and which ones of you are just human non-persons. We don't think that way. So what does that mean? Well, if I rephrase it with a bit of a definition, essentially what they're saying is that there are certain humans that exist, that are alive, biologically speaking, and belong to our species. But there is something so different about them that it allows us to treat them in a way that we would not normally be able to treat another living human being. There's something so different about them that we can treat them in a way we would not normally be able to treat another human being. And when we say it that way, it doesn't sound so foreign anymore. Because we can think back to examples of that exact argument being made. We can think back of ways that we said, there's something so different about you, I can treat you in a different way. I can enslave you. I can kill you. I can intern you. I can abuse you. I can deny you some fundamental right. And in the past, we've done it based on the color of skin or the religion or the ethnic origin of someone or maybe their socioeconomic status or their gender. We look back and we say, that was a horrible distinction to make. That was unjust. That was wrong. But now we substitute those distinctions with a new one. I can treat the unborn living human being differently because of some difference that they have between all of us and themselves that allows us to be able to take their life then, but not later. So what is the difference? And that's where our second question comes into play. We have a living human being, and they're making a claim that there is something different about them that allows us to be able to take their life when we would not normally be able to take the life of a living human being. So we ask this question, well, do those differences matter? And it's not, do those differences exist? Because absolutely, differences exist between us out here in this room, people we all recognize as having this kind of fundamental human right to live. Differences between us, or exist between us and the unborn child. For example, raise your hand if you are currently located in a uterus. No one, right? That's pretty significant, right? That's a big difference. So it's not whether or not the differences exist, it's do those differences matter in a moral sense? Meaning, can I take the life of somebody because of that difference? And we can think of tons of differences between us and the unborn child, right? Luckily for us, instead of attacking those very particular differences, philosophers have been able to narrow them down into 4 categories. And they're able to make it spell a word, sled. Sled, like you're going sledding down a hill. Size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. Because you see, the unborn are much smaller than us. They have not reached certain developmental milestones yet. They're located where we are not. And they are often more dependent on the life of another human being for their own survival. So those differences absolutely exist. And we ask, do they matter in a moral sense? Are they morally significant differences? And if we think about what those differences are, we must conclude that they are not morally significant. If we think about this argument that, well, they're just a clump of cells, you can't even see them yet, they don't even appear to be human, they don't look human, that's an argument of size. But since when are larger people more valuable than smaller people? Since when is it okay to take, or is it less wrong to take the life of a small person versus a large person? It's ridiculous. Because our value isn't in size, our value is in what we are being a human being. And a small person is just as much a human being as a large person. So size can't be the difference that justifies taking the life of an unborn child. So we go to L, level of development. That's a really common one, right? They'll say something like, doesn't have brainwaves yet, right? Doesn't have a consciousness. It doesn't have a heartbeat. It can't feel pain. Whatever the developmental milestones might be that they're picking out, they're saying that's the point. That's the thing that's different, that matters. Once it can do that, I'm all for equal rights. But prior to that, it's not like us. And again, we ask, is level of development really morally significant? Meaning, is not a newborn child less developed than a 5-year-old, who's less developed than a 15-year-old, who's less developed than a 25-year-old? Along those stages of development, reaching those developmental milestones, how many more fundamental human rights are they acquiring? At what point can I not kill a toddler? What developmental milestone is it? Well, they'll say, no. Those developmental milestones don't matter because they're all human beings. Reaching puberty is a major developmental milestone, but that doesn't give you fundamental human rights at that point. Because those abilities to do some function or perform some ability or to have some sort of self-awareness or consciousness or reason or cognitive skill, those developmental milestones don't change what we are. So then we say, well, it's not size, it's not level of development, it must be environment. The unborn child is located in a uterus, and we are not. Maybe that is the fundamental difference that justifies taking their life then, but not now. And again, we ask, should our rights change with location? Can I kill someone in one place, they travel a few inches, a few feet, a few miles, and now I cannot kill them? And again, we reject that idea. Our value doesn't change as we travel, because environment doesn't matter in a moral sense. So lastly, this is a last-ditch effort. They have probably the most used difference you'll hear. The unborn child is completely dependent on the life of the mother for its own survival. Therefore, it can be treated in a different way. And is it dependent? Yes. But we always ask the question, is degree of dependency a fundamental difference, a morally significant difference between us and the unborn, saying we can kill them because of it? And we should again reject degree of dependency being impactful to our fundamental human rights. For example, my brother-in-law, he's got diabetes. He wears an insulin pump. If he goes without that insulin pump or some other form of medical intervention for a day, he will likely die. He has a dependency that I don't have. He is more dependent on the life or on medical technology and for his whole childhood, his parents, for his own survival than I am. His degree of dependency is certainly greater. But does that impact in any way his fundamental human rights? No, because it doesn't change what he is at all. You see, the pro-choice lobby understands that there must be equal rights for all of us, right? They aren't out there advocating for the murder of 5-year-olds and 20-year-olds or anything like that. They understand that innocent life has value. What we have to press them on is, where does that come from? Where do our equal rights come from at all? Everyone wants it. If I say the word equal rights on a college campus, it doesn't matter who's in the room, everyone's going to agree with it. Where do they come from? And they're going to say one of those four to try to justify having abortion still. But instead, we can flip that argument back to them. Let's use equal rights as an argument. Abortion is an equal rights violation. And the way we show that is by saying, where do equal rights come from? If we all have them, what is their foundation? Because if we all have equal rights, we must have something in common, right? And we must have it at all times and share it equally with everybody else in this room. But as I look around this room, there are certainly a lot of differences between us. There's difference in age and race and gender, difference in intelligence, difference in economic statuses. There's not one person in this room that I am exactly the same as. So what do I share with every person in this room equally at all times that they share with every other person in this room equally at all times? The only thing is that we are all human. We all share humanity. So if equal rights truly are equal, and everyone has them, the only foundation that they can be built upon is that all humans deserve equal rights. Therefore, if the unborn truly are human, we cannot exclude them from that family. Now that all seems to make sense for us, right? But in practice, we rarely have a discussion that goes through that process. What is the unborn? Is it alive? Is it human? Is it different in a morally significant way or not? Instead, what happens, we just get an argument tossed our way. Abortion should be legal because of poverty. Abortion should be legal because of overpopulation, because of disability. All these things that we hear so often. And they commit a logical fallacy. They assume in their argument the conclusion that they're trying to prove. It's called kind of begging the question. And we can draw that error out to bring the argument back to what I just walked through. And the way we do that is that whenever we hear an argument to justify abortion, we ask ourselves, would that argument justify killing a toddler? And if it doesn't, then they have assumed something about the unborn without proving it. So literally, we do this on the college campus. We bring out we don't bring out a real toddler. That'd be like kind of sick to be like, would you kill him? But we bring out an imaginary toddler. And we hear this argument, abortion in the case of poverty, for example. Pretty common. And we say, all right, I have in front of me 3-year-old Timmy, and he's living in extraordinary poverty. He was hungry for days on end. His father's out of the picture. His mother's doing the best she can, but they have 4 brothers and 3 sisters already. He's the newest one, and that burden on the family for the past 3 years of Timmy being there has just put them over the financial edge. They're having to pick which child eats every day. And the mother's working every job she can to try to survive. His life right now is horrible, and it's not going to get any better. He's not going to be able to go to a good school. He's not going to graduate. He's probably going to end up living with or joining a gang, getting involved in some sort of crime, probably going to jail. He's probably going to be dead by the time he's 40. It's a dark picture for Timmy. One that real people probably go through. And one day, his mother looks at her 7 children, Timmy being the youngest, and says, I could manage with 6. I was able to make it work. The 7th put us into this poverty that we can't escape from. Would it be okay for her to take the life of 3-year-old Timmy because of the extreme poverty and real suffering that they're experiencing? And every student I've ever talked to would say, no, obviously you can't kill 3-year-old Timmy. And you ask this question, this really important question, and you say it as honestly as you can, well, why not? Why can't I kill Timmy? And they'll go back and forth a little bit, but eventually you're going to get to the point where you agree, you can't kill a human being because they're poor. Right? But their argument said you can kill the unborn because they're poor. Cannot kill a human being, can kill the unborn. They've made an assumption about the unborn child in their argument justifying abortion with poverty without proving it. I believe you cannot kill another human being due to poverty, but you can kill the unborn because I must believe the unborn is not a human being like the toddler. They must not be alive, they must not be human, or they must have something different about them that would justify taking their life then, but not now. But in that argument, they made no such argument. They merely assumed it to be true. And that's what we need to call out. When we hear that argument, abortion should be justified because of X, we say, does that justify killing this 3-year-old? Yes or no? If not, they've assumed the unborn is not like the 3-year-old, and we walk them through the questions. Is it alive? Is it human? And what difference is there that would justify treating it in a way that we would not normally be able to treat another human being? And if we do that, if we walk them through those arguments, we can't lose. Because the science is on our side, and the philosophy is on our side. It's easy to win someone's mind on this issue if you can walk them through that argument and listen to their questions and stay disciplined in bringing them back to the core questions of what is the unborn, and do the differences between us and the unborn matter in a moral sense. Now, that seems easy when we talk about poverty, right? seems easy if we're going to talk about some of the other potential questions we might have, like overpopulation. Can't kill toddlers because we're overpopulated. Why can we kill the unborn if we are overpopulated? But what about a hard one? What about the most referenced hard case in the issue? I'm pro-life except in cases of rape. Right? How often do we hear that from a politician or just a casual person that you talk to, right? In the case of rape, abortion should be permissible or available to a woman. And as we're talking through this philosophy and this reason, like I talked about in the beginning, this issue is human. And we can't forget that. We can't forget that about the little boy in the jar. We also cannot forget that about the woman who finds herself in a crisis pregnancy, especially in the case of rape. Abortion or no abortion, this woman's going to live with that traumatic event the rest of her life. And we as a society have an obligation to her, to support her, and help her find healing as best as possible. And we have an obligation to society to make sure that those individuals who commit those crimes are actually prosecuted to the fullest extent we can. And we can't skip over that. We can't appear unempathetic by jumping straight to an argument. But if someone's asking you about that issue and you want to engage on that, they're committing the same, if they're justifying rape for abortion, they're committing the same fallacy that the poverty argument did. Because if you think about it, let's imagine for a second a woman is raped and gets pregnant. And she decides that she's gonna go through with the pregnancy. She's going to raise this child. She gives birth to the child, and for a while it's going as well as it can, given the situation. She's finding some healing from this child's life, and it's a little boy, and she loves this child. A few years in, though, something starts to change. This little boy starts to lose that kind of baby face as he goes into his toddler years. And she starts noticing that he's now looking exactly like his biological father. And this child that she loves so much, she now can't stand. Because every time she sees his face, she relives that day. And she's suffering tremendously. She's depressed. It's physically tolling on her. She can't love the child or support the child anymore. She can't work. The suffering is significant and it is real. In that situation, as a society, would we feel it appropriate or justified if, to relieve her own very real suffering, she took the life of a 3-year-old little boy that caused her to relive that event? And though sympathetic to her suffering, we would still say, no, that's not an appropriate action to take. Instead, we should try to find support or healing or adoption or something else short of taking the life of another human being to relieve our own suffering. And then we ask the question, well, why not? Why couldn't she kill a 3-year-old little boy? And it's because we can't kill another human being to relieve our own suffering. But what changed between that 3-year-old that we cannot kill and that same 3-year-old 3 years plus 6 months earlier when we could have killed him? What changed between those two little boys conceived in the same way? What's different? They were both alive. They were both human. Scientifically, nothing changed. He's bigger now. He's more developed. He's a little less dependent. But those aren't morally significant reasons to justify taking the life of another human being. Another difficult argument, and And as the pro-choice arguments kind of evolved, this is where you're going to hear most justifications for abortion land from people who have engaged in this issue a little more intently. They're going to say something like the woman has a right over her own body. She has bodily autonomy. In the past, it was, and probably still is, referred to as, my body, my choice. And the difficult thing about that argument is that they don't deny the science. It's not so easy to repudiate as a false claim that the unborn aren't alive yet, or they're not human. That's pretty easy to combat, right? Science is pretty clear on that. Instead, what they say is, yeah, it's alive. Yeah, it's human. Just like the toddler. And yeah, I agree. Things like size and level of development and dependency, they aren't really morally significant. However, I still think abortion should be okay. Because when it comes down to it, it's the woman's body, and whatever rights the unborn child might have, the woman always trumps them. Because it's her body. Essentially, she has sovereignty over her own body to the point that she can kill another human being in the name of bodily autonomy. So when we think about that argument, what we have to do is debunk the idea that we have complete sovereignty over our bodies. Not just women, but men. That as human beings, we cannot do whatever we want with our own bodies to the detriment of another. Though we're pro-choice in a lot of things, meaning a woman should be able to choose what career she pursues, or who she marries, or where she goes to school, or anything like that, there are certain choices we should not be able to make. So how do we debunk the idea of complete bodily autonomy? One of the easiest ways is to use a reference to a medicine that was popular at one point called thalidomide. It would be prescribed to women, pregnant women, who are experiencing severe nausea, morning sickness, and it would relieve that morning sickness. However, it can't be used now for that because it causes severe birth defects in the child. They'd be born without limbs, for example. So let's imagine that there's this woman, and she's having severe morning sickness, severe nausea, and she goes to her doctor after going on WebMD or something, and says, hey, I need thalidomide. And the doctor says, no, I can't prescribe that because it causes these severe birth defects. Let's pursue a different treatment. But she doesn't want anything else. She wants thalidomide. So she shops around a little bit. Eventually she finds a doctor that's willing to give this to her. She goes home, she takes it, the morning sickness goes away. This child is born, no arms, no legs. Society would generally say there was something wrong in that action that should not be available for somebody to do. However, she could have taken the life of that same child. It is wrong to intentionally take the limbs of a child, but it would not have been wrong to take the life of that child. It doesn't seem consistent. But let's up it a little bit. This woman gives birth to her son or daughter, no arms, no legs. She gets pregnant again a few years later. This time, no morning sickness, no nausea, everything's going really smoothly. But she begins to look at her first child and says, how's it going to make my first child feel if I have this second child who has arms and legs? It's going to make him feel really bad. So I'm going to take thalidomide again. This time, not to relieve any medical issues I might have. I'm going to take thalidomide for the sole purpose of having a child with no arms and no legs. So they can both be in that situation. Whatever you thought about the first situation, we should all recognize that to intentionally, for no other reason other than to cause harm to a child, to intentionally do that is wrong. But if I have bodily autonomy to the point that I can take the life of an unborn child, I should absolutely have bodily autonomy to the point that I can maim him. If I can kill someone, is that not the worst thing that we could do to another person? Is it not inconsistent to say you can't remove the arms and legs, but you can take the life? And the reason that's inconsistent is because society recognizes we don't truly have this unlimited autonomy. We cannot use autonomy in the name of intentionally harming another human being. And if we can't do that to harm another human being, if we can't use that to justify harming another human being, then we certainly cannot use bodily autonomy as a justification to kill another human being. There's lots of other arguments and things that will come up in that topic of bodily autonomy, but just remember that your task is to debunk the idea that we have this complete sovereignty over our body by showing that we don't even have that level of sovereignty to a lesser extent. So, why are we pro-life? Why is abortion wrong? Abortion is wrong because from the moment of conception, you were a whole, living, and distinct human being. And there was nothing morally significantly different between the fetus you once were and the human being you are now that would justify being able to take your life then, but not now. And since abortion intentionally takes the life of that innocent human being, it must be wrong. So what should that cause us to do? Well, I'm glad you guys are here because the first thing you need to do is make sure that you engage and equip yourself on this issue because we want to make sure you're prepared to go out and speak on this. So this is a great start. There's tons of resources online or books and everything that you can read, and you can talk to me about some of those afterwards. The second thing I want to encourage you all to do is to make sure that you're engaging with everybody. On both sides of this issue, we have this tendency where we like to gather together with each other and talk about how pro-life or pro-choice we are. And I do it too. It's great to be in situations like this where I have a friendly audience and we can talk about how pro-life we are, congratulate each other and be like, that's so awesome, like, I'm glad that you're on the right side. But lives aren't going to be saved by doing that. It can be encouraging, it can be equipping, but lives won't be saved if that's where we stop. At some point, we have to look to the other side and say, how can I engage with them? How can I meet them where they're at and change their hearts and their minds on this issue so that a life will be saved? And then lastly, align your moral spectrum. And I talk about this with high school and college students a lot. They're figuring out what they care about at that point in their life. They're being exposed to all these social injustices that exist, whether it's the environment or education or immigration or poverty or war or the death penalty or whatever it might be. They're being exposed to so many new things potentially, and they're trying to figure out, what do I care about? Where am I going to invest my time, my energy, and my skills? And it's not that every person has to quit their job and become a pro-life activist full-time, but some of you probably do, or should. Some of those students should. Others of you should be full-time education activists or whatever too. Those are all good things to do. What I want to make sure we do is not let abortion fall wherever it does on accident. Make sure it's an intentional decision that you make by understanding what abortion truly is and who the victim is. And when we think about what it is and who the victim is, I think it needs to be at or near the top of all of our priorities today, tomorrow, and forevermore, until abortion is no more. Because this is an unprecedented rate of death. Nearly 1 million per year, sustained for decades. It's being perpetrated against the most innocent and the most vulnerable of any human being. If any of us believe that anyone is undeserving of death, it should be the unborn child who has no voice, no ability to do any evil, no ability to speak out for themselves, no ability to vote or walk in the streets and protest, they deserve the protection if anyone does. And it should cause us to think, how loud do I need to be? What action is required of me? And we think about, again, what abortion is and who the victim is and how much life it has taken. It means that we need to be tremendously loud, because we have 60 million voices that are silent right now, that can't speak for themselves, and it's hard to be loud enough to make up for 60 million voices that are gone. But we need to start doing it. I'll end with this small example of that. We were just meeting with a student group on campus, and we were talking about how they're essentially these social justice warriors walking in the footsteps of greats before, like Wilberforce or King. They're walking in these footsteps or on these shoulders of greats, and I want them to take on this identity of, I'm a social justice warrior. And one of the students spoke up and said, I have a confession to make. Today, I went to get dressed in the morning, and I hadn't done laundry. He's a typical college kid, right? Hadn't done laundry, hasn't been home in weeks, potentially. And he had no clean clothes, except for one shirt. That one shirt was a shirt we gave him when he went on the March for Life with us this past January. And it said that Roe v. Wade was an injustice since 1973. Big, bold letters. Hard to miss. He looked at that one clean shirt and a pile of dirty laundry, and he wore dirty clothes instead. And he said that whole day, he couldn't stop thinking about that decision he made. And how he's like, I know what's happening, that millions of lives are being lost, and I don't have the courage to wear a pro-life t-shirt because I'm afraid that someone might say something to me, knowing that a few miles down the road there's an abortion clinic where people are dying. And the group was talking about it, saying like, I do the same thing. I'm afraid, right? It's not a popular thing to do. The media's not going to be on your side. Your friends might not be on your side. Your college professors aren't going to be on your side about this. So it's not popular, but it's our obligation. So that group did commit on this coming Monday, actually. They're all going to wear their pro-life t-shirts as part of a pro-life t-shirt day and walk around campus together, just in this solidarity to help make up for that one example. But I think we all have examples like that in our life, probably. Opportunities we could have talked about this issue, things we could have done that we might have missed unknowingly, or maybe we actively avoided. I want us to make sure that when we are presented with that issue, we think back to, there's a baby in a jar somewhere who had no one sticking up for him, and there's going to be more of them unless I am the one that does something. So I want to thank you guys for all being here. I'll be hanging around afterwards, obviously for the Q&A, and then afterwards as well. I appreciate your time, your energy, your passion for this issue, and look forward to saving lives with all of you. Thank you.
So what do you think? Did you get your money's worth? Absolutely. It's been an amazing day. An absolutely amazing day.
It's live. It's okay. You'll pass it back and forth.
We move now to the question and answer period. Probably the most popular segment of these conferences. So we're going to try to keep the questions to around 2 to 3 minutes. We'll be respectful of your time, and we should end on time. And we'll just bounce back and forth between the questions. So, Dr. Miller, you can start us off. Regarding John Paul's Evangelium Vitae 62, you mentioned it states abortion is a moral disorder. Is that equivalent to a moral evil? If not, what weight does it signify?
Moral disorder. I'm not sure that there is really any substantial difference between calling abortion a moral disorder and a moral evil. I think, though, the moral disorder leads to the evil. So in that sense, there may be a distinction. And we talk about a moral disorder, the disorder originates in, well, frankly, and even, Trevor's speech, bad thinking, improper conclusions, wrong evaluations, bad attitudes that can give birth to the evil action that flows from it. So it really matters what you think, all right? It really matters what your attitude is towards the issue of, even just broadly speaking, the sanctity of human life. Because evils originate out of those that bad moral ordering, which I think originates in your thinking, and then of course it creates a culture that is morally disordered. So those two things I think are definitely linked together.
Heard a new term, cultural deafness. We are deaf to what's happening even when we hear something about abortion. How can we increase our hearing in our culture?
I think a lot of the reasons, or the main reason we're deaf on this issue in particular, is that is who the victim ultimately is, right? When we are able to see so many other social justice issues, we're able to see the victim so clearly. And the media is great, and sometimes is great at showing the victim. And we think about like the civil rights movement in the 60s. What some of the most powerful things that led to change was these images of African Americans being sprayed down with fire hoses or beaten by police, or all these things were like, that's so wrong. My eyes are opened. I must act. I must do something. Something needs to change. But with abortion, our victim is very difficult to see, and sometimes actively hidden from the public eye. So it's not as much that we're deaf. I think that we're blind sometimes to this issue because we can't see the victim so clearly, and we can't hear the victim. They can't vote. They can't walk. They can't protest. So I think to change that, we need to be the ones that give the victims a voice, and sometimes give the victim a face with images of abortion victims. We use those on college campuses, and it's a scary thing to do sometimes because it brings up such reaction. But it's also probably the most effective way that we've found to change people's minds and hearts on this issue. If you can actually talk about this issue when there is a victim that is looking at you, that a life's been taken, we can open people's eyes to the reality of ultimately what abortion is and what it does to another human being.
Thank you. Dr. Miller, can you explain the Red Rose Initiative?
Oh, okay, how much time do I have? You're talking about Red Rose Rescues, I'm assuming.
It just says Red Rose Initiative.
Yeah, okay, I think that's what they must be referring to. Some of you are old enough to remember that back in the 70s, 80s, and into the mid-90s, there was a very, very vigorous, very robust rescue movement that was a staple of our pro-life response to abortion, and namely, where literally, in its heyday, which would have been the late 80s and very early 90s, thousands and up even to tens of thousands of pro-lifers would block the doors to abortion clinics to stop the killing, to defend the unborn. And I got in on that very, very early. I'm a criminal. When I was 24 years old, and did a rescue in Chicago in 1978. And I've always felt very strongly about defending the unborn that way. There's a lot of complicated reasons, not the least of which would be the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act that was signed by Bill Clinton in 1994 that virtually did bring a halt to the rescue movement. There are other reasons, but that was a big one. A bunch of us still believed very strongly that there should be some kind of immediate response to the imminent deaths of the unborn. Beyond sidewalk counseling, which in my opinion is the backbone of pro-life activism. So a bunch of us got together. We had a meeting in April of 2017 in St. Louis. Could we resurrect in some form, in some fashion, a rescue effort? And so and then we had a second meeting in June of the same year. And so we devised what's referred to as the Red Rose Rescue. And literally that means we will go into abortion clinics. In fact, we did one just down the street here, September 15th of 2017, and I was part of that at the Northland Family Planning. That was the first, one of the first Red Rose Rescues. This took place right here in your own neighborhood, here in Sterling Heights. And we go into the waiting room very quietly. We cap the number of people going into the abortion clinic at 6. 6 people, no more than 6, and usually no less than 3. We might go down to 2, but we don't want to present ourselves as protesting abortion. We're not there to protest abortion. We go into the waiting room, we try to be as quiet and as incognito as possible, sit down in the chair and talk to the moms one-on-one before they're going to walk down that hall to go kill their baby. This is the last opportunity that they're going to have to listen to a voice of encouragement. At some point, we will be outed, so to speak. The police will get called. And part of our other effort in the Red Rose Rescue is because we're there to defend the unborn in a practical sense with complete nonviolence, we will not leave. We will not leave those babies. We will be there in solidarity with those victims. That we're the only one that will stand up for them in those last moments. And I think the unborn child has a right to that defense, has a right to somebody being there for them and stand for them and witness to their lives. And again, not an abstract issue. These are real babies who are going to be put to death within a matter of minutes. You're there to be with them. I liken it to what Mother Teresa said in her own work in India. What are we doing? We're going to go out and engage the poor. We're not going to wait for the poor to come to us. We're going to go to them. We will go into the dark holes of the poor. And she meant really into those hovels, those lean-tos, those tin shacks, those tin shack villages that would be in Calcutta. But for us, the dark holes of the poor are the abortion centers, the darkest holes really, where there is no light, no encouragement, complete despair, death, and deception. So we refuse to leave, so we have to be taken out, and of course that will result in various charges of whatever kind. And so I did spend 32 days in the Oakland County Hilton, not this summer, but the summer before. And I got to say, all of it's a blessing. You go to court, it's a blessing. You stand up in front of the judge, it's a blessing. You witness to the jurors, it's a blessing. The media that we got out of it. So the witness doesn't stop at the point of the arrest, but it continues for many months even after that. And so if anybody, we do have a Red Rose Rescue National Conference coming up. I have cards about that on my table, so please feel free to take a batch of those and pass them out. Consider coming to the conference. And if you're able to consider joining, do a rescue. It isn't going to kill you. Do one. I survived. Here I am, right? So, so the conference is at the end of April, and it's in St. Louis. You go to the Red Rose Rescue website, real simple, redroserescue.com, and there's a lot of resources there that'll help you see what we're about. Thanks. God bless you for that.
Thank you. Trevor, what do you see as the primary reason Christians do not come out in force against abortion?
I think why it's going to be really difficult to paint that with a large brush, but I think one of the primary things that's causing it to happen is this widening of what it means to be pro-life. So there's this idea, and it's a really dangerous idea in some ways, not because I disagree with any particular parts of it, but I disagree with some of the consequences that it's causing. There's an idea that if you're really pro-life, you would do, and then 5,000 things follow that are in no way related to abortion. So it's like, if you're really pro-life, you'd be out there fighting just as hard for immigration reform and education reform and poverty and blah, 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 blah. All these things that, yes, I agree. All those things are valuable. They are important issues. But what the source of that often is not pro-life people saying, if you're really pro-life, you should do this. A lot of times what's happened is the pro-choice groups have said, if you guys were really pro-life, you would do all these other things. And they do that because they want to dilute and distract our message. They want to dilute our message, so it's not just abortion. Abortion is just one thing. It's of all these other social justice issues, and now abortion's messages, or our pro-life message, is less impactful. And they want to distract, meaning you should do all these things. So then when we accept that as a church, we say, yeah, all those things are equally important. We accept that, then what we have to do, I guess, is like on Mondays, we fight abortion. On Tuesdays, we fight for education reform. On Wednesdays, immigration reform. On Fridays, we do this. And Saturdays, we do this. And then now we are 1/7 as effective, right? And now more people are going to die because of it. So because we've sometimes accepted that call to say, well, pro-life must mean I must do all these other things too, we've become less effective. Again, it's not that we don't agree with doing some of those things. It's just that you can be pro-life and not devote all your time to all these other issues at the same time, right? It's enough to say, hey, killing 1 million unborn children a year is good enough for me to focus on. I can give 100% of my effort to that, and that's okay. And you can give 100% of your effort to immigration reform if that's your call, right? It's okay. We don't need to accept this dilution and distraction of our message necessarily.
Dr. Miller, maybe a little theological here. What does the church believe happens to the souls of the aborted babies as far as going to heaven? And if we have a feast day of the Holy Innocents, of course referring to the 2,000 babies killed by Herod, does that mean these babies are considered martyrs?
That's a great question. Actually, I wrote my master's thesis on the salvation of the aborted unborn, or those who are babies who are not baptized. And okay. First of all, as Catholics, the Catholic Church actually does not have a dogmatic conclusion on what happens to the souls of unbaptized infants. And there's been a great deal of theological development within the last, I would say, 500 years on this very particular topic. And the Catholic Church teaches that baptism is necessary for salvation, and that is why the Catholic Church practices that, the infants need to be baptized and so on and welcomed into the Christian community and the covenant of God and so on. The point is God is not a prisoner of his sacraments, okay? And his grace can reach beyond the physical, actual rite, R-I-T-E, of the sacraments. And so, for example, you would have what's referred to as baptism of desire. So, for example, a Christian couple have a pregnancy, but the baby is born dead, a stillborn child. Would they have baptized that baby if the baby had lived? And this is actually something that goes back to the 16th century, working out this problem. And so the Catholic Church accepts what's referred to as baptism of desire. The parents would have baptized that child. God will honor that. And we don't have an unreasonable God, for heaven's sake. So there's that argument. When I wrote my senior thesis, or my master's thesis on this issue, here's what I believe. And I think I can take my cues, so to speak, from the massacre of the innocents, as it's recorded in the the Gospel of Matthew. They are considered saints and martyrs. Well, first of all, they weren't even Christians. Their parents weren't Christians. They were Jewish children. And yet we consider them saints and martyrs because they died, quote unquote, in the place of Jesus. Because Herod was trying to find him. And so their blood is spilled as a kind of substitute for Jesus in that episode. I believe that the unborn are saved who suffer the injustice of abortion. And I believe they're saved because my theological argument is that anyone, and in particular an unborn child, or a child, but we're talking about abortion here. The unborn child suffers an injustice, endures a death contrary to their God-given rights. And I think any suffering that is human, genuinely human, is already united to the cross of Jesus. I don't think Jesus is oblivious to that suffering. I think that suffering is united to him, and he encompasses it. And as a consequence of that, they're saved. Their deaths are not neutral. Their deaths are not negative. Their deaths have a salvific spiritual meaning in relationship to the God and to the Savior that created them. And I think for that reason, I've taken a lot of aborted babies out of the trash. I've seen them face to face. I believe in my heart and soul that I'm going to see them. I will see them in the afterlife. So, they're not lost. There's my answer.
Trevor, what demographic do you see as the most important to reach in changing the public mindset on abortion?
What demographic is most important to reach? I think that it probably goes between the church and men. I think right now, at least in my perception of it. The church, because we have this long story tradition of being those that stand up against injustice and have success at ending it. And I think we need to continue doing what we're doing, but engage in even more. But speaking on men in particular, when I'm on the college campus and whoever's passionate about this issue on either side, it's almost always women, right? And I think that's unfortunate because it's not necessarily that like guys don't know anything about abortion. I think unfortunately a lot of men have just accepted this idea that it's not their issue. And without that united voice from all people that abortion is the greatest human rights injustice of our time, we're not going to be able to win. We need to have their voices be part of this equally to women's voices. And it's a lie that this is a woman's issue. It impacts women uniquely, absolutely, but it is ultimately a human rights issue that is at stake, where we're saying there are certain members of the human species that are not members of the human family. And I don't need to be a woman to be able to engage with that issue, right? Just like I can say slavery is abhorrent and is wrong, is immoral, without me personally ever having been a slave or a slave owner. It is an observation of a people group being abused that is all we need to see. And until everyone unites against that, men and women and every race and creed and religion, until everyone unites against that, abortion is going to exist.
Dr. Miller, how would you respond to, it's my body, my choice?
Well, first of all, it's not your body. It's somebody else's body. And I think, when Trevor was giving his speech, he brought up what I think is our most difficult obstacle in terms of what it is that we're facing in the argument for legalized abortion, and that is location. That the unborn child is inside the body of the woman, and so then that has given rise to this false, but we'll call it prerogative, that since the unborn child, human or not, a person or not, is inside the body of the woman, she therefore has the right to say whether or not that pregnancy will continue. And this, I think that is where the argument is right now, because they've lost on the science. The science is not on their side, and so we have to show. And I think as I remarked in my speech, what that my body, my choice. Okay, but what are you really saying about your nature as a woman? I think we gotta exploit that. What they're really saying is that there's something wrong with female biology. That in order for me to be free, to have that right to self-determination, my autonomy, my individuality, and frankly, for me to be able to compete on the same playing field with a guy, what a man has by nature, then the woman must achieve by art. And what's the art? Killing her unborn child. She's really saying, in order for me to be free, in order for me to be a success like that actress at the Golden Globe Awards, she's really saying, I have to kill something. So you want to say my body, my choice, but then what are you saying about, the problem is, you're saying something wrong about your body. Okay? You're actually saying that your body is against you as a woman. That you have to do something to your physicality as a female in order to be free. And that, well, frankly, and you were born that way. From the start, there's something askew about female nature that we have to kill something in order to be liberated. And so you have to twist that back on them to show how negative it ultimately is. And I'm not sure that we've actually exploited that to the benefit, to the pro-life benefit in a way that I think that we can.
Trevor, what are the most common objections that you receive in pro-choice circles?
I think it's been remarkable how it's changed, actually. So when I started doing a lot of these talks, it was probably about 5 years ago, and the way the arguments have changed over the past 5 years has been shocking. 5 years ago, I spent most of my time talking about science. I spent most of my time rebuking things like, it's not alive yet, it's not a human yet. And it was a little sad that was the state of awareness, I guess, at the time, but it was also remarkably easy to combat, because I would come with my textbooks, I would come with my quotes, I would come with my videos of pro-choicers saying, yeah, it's alive, yeah, it's human, and it'd be really easy to combat. And we saw a ton of hearts and minds change on that issue very quickly, because they're like, oh, I just didn't know. It was just ignorance, and I now accept, or I'm at least closer to accepting the pro-life position. About 2 years ago, it changed, and I don't necessarily know what happened. I think that it's starting to permeate through the pro-choice movement more, to recognize that the science really isn't on their side, similar to what Dr. Miller was saying. And now it has turned to, it doesn't even matter what the unborn is anymore, right? we have to start there. Like, we have to make sure that they understand what the unborn is, because if it is a simple thing, like they just don't know that it's human, that's great, that's easy to work with. But if they say, yeah, it's live, it's human, and it just doesn't matter, then what we have is one people group who is stronger, who is smarter, who is more resourced, saying to another people group who is weaker and is more silent, that for convenience, we can take your life. To make our life better, or perceived better, or what I think will be better, I have the right to end yours. And now that's the discussion that we're having. And when I say that to you guys, like, obviously we're going to reject that and be like, no, you can't kill someone for convenience. But you'd be shocked, I think, by how many people would be like, yeah, it's okay. And how much more now I'm hearing, yeah, it's okay, even after birth. And the advancements, that this idea that, like, a pig is more valuable than a newborn child because they're smarter and they contribute more to society. Therefore, if we can kill pigs, we can kill newborns. The arguments that I'm hearing the most now are the more radical arguments, and I think that's a sign of the way this issue is changing. I think for better or for worse, in some ways I think this might be for better, there's less room in the middle. There's less arguments about, hey, let's find that common ground of abortion should be safe and legal and rare. There's no more room for that anymore in politics. There's less and less room for that on college campuses. There's less and less room for that anywhere. And now we're finding that polarization occur. What I think is, at the same time, scary, but also encouraging about that is that it's going to expose the pro-choice movement and the abortion movement for really what it is. And the general population is going to see, I don't think that we should be able to have abortion in any case up to the moment of birth or after birth, regardless of circumstance. I don't think that's what I believe. And if these two camps are polarized, and I have to side with that or the pro-life movement, whose worldview is that all human beings are valuable, intrinsically valuable, with dignity that deserves protection, I'm going to fall on the side of the pro-life movement. And I think that's our opportunity now, is to show that dichotomy so clearly that people will recognize it and make the obvious decision that they can't support that right to abort.
Dr. Miller, this is obviously a question from the heart. How does someone who was formerly pro-choice pray to become 100% pro-life? I don't want to be a hypocrite Catholic, and that's why I'm here. I've learned a lot, but still feel that many right-to-life efforts seem selective and lean towards oppressing poor women versus wealthy.
Well, in some ways it's a hard question to answer, I think. I think it's important to, I'm going to start at this level, kind of clear out the politics. I do think that one of the things that the pro-life movement suffers from is that we're perceived as being conservative. I don't have any problem with being a conservative. It depends on what it is we're conserving. But the other side claims to own the moral high ground, more generous when it comes to social issues, social safety nets, the plight of the immigrant, and all of that. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because, as I said in my speech, are there other issues? Of course there are. But I don't think, sometimes I do, let me put it this way, sometimes I think, it was going to be something I was going to roll into my talk, but I didn't want to run out of time. I do think that there's an obstacle of identity where others who may want to join the pro-life effort and get on board with it have an obstacle. It's a political identity obstacle. They don't want to perceived as being, oh, everybody's going to think I now will have to vote for Trump. I will now have to be a card-carrying Republican. I will now have to be very socially conservative. I will have to be a member of the National Rifle Association. And so there's all of that political identity baggage that comes with pro-lifers. Now, I think it's a stereotype, of course, but for some people who would be willing to join into the pro-life effort, that's an obstacle for them. That they don't want to be part of that kind of political identity. And so the only thing I could say to such a person is you got to kind of let it go. Either the truth is not Democrat or Republican, it's the truth. And you can make your own identity as a pro-lifer and not worry or not have to worry about that. Or maybe it's just something you need to get over. If that's the obstacle, you need to see your way through it, and not allow that to be the thing that hinders you or prevents you from embracing the plight of the unborn. And by the way, while I'm on this subject, there is a fascinating book called "Defenders of the Unborn: The Right to Life Movement Before Roe versus Wade." And it's written by Daniel Williams, and it was published by Oxford University Press, so not a slouch publisher. I did a review of the book for Crisis Magazine, so if you want to look up my review, crisismagazine.com, just Google my name or put my name in the search box, it'll come up. But it shows you that going all the way back to the 1920s, into the 30s, the 40s, and well into the 60s, there was a pro-life movement before 1973 because a lot of states were already removing legal protections from the unborn before we got to the, Supreme Court decision. And some pro-life groups will actually date their founding back to 1967, 68, 69. Pro-lifers were Democrats. The pro-life movement was they were politically Democrats until we saw the shift happening with the Democratic Party in the mid-1970s. And then the shift over to the Republicans. And so there was a default. We're Republicans by default. We have no other place to go. And now that party is so entrenched when it comes to this issue. I don't even know I don't know. Again, I don't like to get too political here, but I don't know if the Democratic Party can be saved on this issue at this point. It would be like trying to turn around the Titanic at this point. But you need to show people who are put off by the conservative politics that you're more sensitive when it comes to other social justice issues. You need to show that and not shy away from it. And I think that will help people. It'll be a bridge to helping other people come into the movement who otherwise are put off by the conservative political identity.
Okay, this should be interesting. Trevor, I remember talking to a Wiccan about abortion. She argued that abortion should be okay prior to ensoulment, and that did not happen until close to birth. How would you argue that?
I've never, knowingly had to argue about abortion with a Wiccan. But I guess there's situations where people say something about like the soul. When does the soul actually begin in the human body, right? When does that happen? And they say it from sometimes a Christian perspective, sometimes a non-Christian perspective. And the easiest way sometimes to talk about that is, for me at least, might not work with the Wiccan, but for everyone else that's watching this conversation, I will default back to what can we actually know right now? What do we scientifically know to be true? It is alive and it is human. Do I know whether your belief is patently false in a way that you're going to believe without me trying to talk about it from my faith that does not intersect with your faith? Maybe I can't convince you on that when the soul begins, and I might not even be able to confidently answer that, right? But what I can do is say, if we're uncertain at all about when that happens or when human value begins, should we err on the side of caution? And you can use kind of a funny example that's pretty popular, whereas imagine you're driving home tonight, it's dark, and it's raining. You're driving down this little 2-lane highway in the country, and up ahead of you, you see a coat, a long brown coat lying in the road. And you think, as you're approaching that, it's probably a coat. But it also could be an old man that lives in the house right there, and he stumbled out in the street and fell down. If you're driving, if you're having that debate in your mind, is it a coat or is it a man? Do you run the coat over or do you swerve to the side? Because you might kill somebody. You should always swerve to the side when we're thinking about potentially recklessly treating human life. So can I tell that Wiccan exactly when the soul begins in the human body that's going to be convincing to her? Probably not. But for everyone in that room who might be wondering when that happens, I guess, from whatever faith background they might be or lack of faith background they might be, human life is so valuable, we have to treat it with extreme care. And if we're at all unsure whether or not we are going to be running over an old man in the street, we should swerve around it, even if it might be a cult.
I'm going to combine two questions here for Dr. Miller. Which countries have the most abortions, top 5 or 10? And what can be done to make a pro-life impact in the third world countries?
Well, I'm not an expert on the demographics, but I have seen enough of the statistics that abortions are very prevalent in the quote-unquote Soviet bloc, and we don't really call it that now. But women are known to have as many as 6 abortions on average in Russia. So I think I can say with some confidence that if that's not the highest, it's certainly going to be up there. There's probably a lot of social reasons, maybe even religious reasons because of the atheistic mindset that dominated the Soviet Union for so many years. And then, so that there's that, and it's probably easy enough to look that up, even just to Google the statistics on the rate of abortion in certain countries. China has got to be way up there, I would assume as well, especially with their, well, now it's the 2-child policy, and India. Places where there's a lot of so-called overpopulation, and the government actually encourages the decrease of having children and so on. Latin America, well, frankly, you've got to start with the church, because in fact I would say that that's the answer practically anywhere. If the church is not engaged, how is the culture going to get changed? And we know that historically, Latin America is dominated by Catholicism. Other Christian denominations are also there. But, and the church is a hierarchical structure. It's got to come from the bishops, down into the priests, in the seminaries, in the schools, in the teachers, and then you'll see a change in what's going on in our culture. I would say even our culture, not just Latin America.
Okay. Trevor, most of us engage with people in passing, day to day. What one-liners are best in presenting to pro-choice people that you find most effective?
Sometimes it depends where they're coming from. I don't typically find one-liners just to be effective in general. Sometimes I'm like snarky and I do that, but that's probably not like the best thing to do. Usually what we want to do is try to understand where they're actually coming from, so that we can provide the best response possible. Because people sometimes say things and they don't actually believe what the words are that are coming out of their mouth. So asking questions to get to what the root is of what they believe and why is going to help you better determine why they're pro-choice. So people are going to say, I'm pro-choice because it's not even a human. Like it's not a living thing. And if you immediately jump to, oh yeah, it is, and here's all these quotes from these embryology textbooks and things like that, you might not actually be addressing what they're saying, because sometimes they don't even know how necessarily to communicate what they believe super clearly. Like they probably don't truly think that it is not a member of the human race. Like they probably accept the DNA. They probably accept that it's alive in some way. But really what they're probably saying is it just isn't the same as us, meaning it doesn't have like the same rights as us. And when that happens, it can just be this discussion of, can you just walk me through what are some of the differences that you think are between the unborn child and a toddler? Just give me some of those examples, and let's just dialogue about this. I'm not going to judge or condemn your examples necessarily. I just want to help you kind of work through your own belief on this issue. And the more that we can ask those questions and have a dialogue, the better. The one-liners, the closest thing I would get to that is kind of like the 30-second elevator pitch, which is, I'm pro-life because from the moment of conception, you are a whole, living, and distinct human being, and there is no morally significant difference between the human being you are now with value and the fetus that you once were that would justify being able to kill you then, but not now. Because differences like size and level of development and environment and dependencies are not adequate justifications to kill another human being. So if I had to give an elevator pitch, it's more than one line, but that's the way I would phrase it, and that's the foundation for what your discussion or dialogue should probably be from then.
Dr. Miller, how do you see as possible ways of correcting the perception of abortion being a Catholic quirk?
Well, I think we have already done that. I think that if you take a look at the spectrum of our culture, I don't think that if you had to take a poll, that most people would say, yeah, abortion is a Catholic issue. I think we're way beyond that. I think that we've even been able to present and speak about abortion as a human rights issue irrespective of religion. The Catholic quirk thing is an argument that is exploited by the pro-abortion Catholic politician. That's the problem. That they treat abortion as if it was some sort of private revelation that God has given to the church only to Catholics. They put it on the same level as I could never pass a law that, for example, forced everyone in the United States of America to believe in the resurrection of Jesus, or the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, or the Trinity. They actually treat abortion as if it was Catholic doctrine on that level. And they, listen, I don't believe for 1 second that they truly believe that. They're using it as an excuse. Because there's lots of other moral teachings of the Catholic Church that they are completely on board with, that they would have absolutely no problem enforcing and supporting certain laws in order to do justice in a whole wide variety of areas. But when it comes to abortion, wow, that's just my private Catholic little belief that I can't impose on somebody who doesn't share my faith. It's nothing but a lie. They know it better than you do, and you just have to throw it right back in their face, because that's all it is. It's a total exploitation and a lie having to do with my personality. And that's why I call it, they treat it as if it were a Catholic quirk. you know, and that's where the whole falsehood comes in. We've had so many, it's so disastrous. I mean, this is one of the things that frustrates me so much as a Catholic. The Jennifer Granholms, the Nancy Pelosi's, and so on. When they say, hey, okay, go back to when Granholm was running against Posthumous, we're looking like 12 years ago, whatever it is now. In the debate, the abortion issue came up. You probably could Google that debate on the internet. And so the abortion issue came up, and she said, I know this is almost verbatim, on Michigan, it was on TV here in Michigan, I am a Catholic. I believe in the teachings of my church, but I cannot impose a teaching of my church on those of other religions who do not accept that teaching. We live in a pluralistic society, and I have to respect the views of those who don't agree with Catholic teaching. She just treated it as a Catholic quirk. And then what was she doing there? When she said, see, this is where I don't think these people are that dumb. When she said, I believe in the teachings of my church, I don't think she really believes in the teachings of her church. I don't think that they are that morally incoherent, where they would personally believe abortion is murder. I personally believe that. My church teaches it. I agree with the teachings of my church, but I am going to support it. I'm going to vote for it. I'm going to advocate it. I don't believe that they are that morally incoherent and divided in their conscience. What I say to them, you don't believe in the teachings of your church. Why don't you just admit it? And that's what they should be doing.
Trevor, what are your thoughts on the new trend of designer babies, in which parents play God, remove undesirable genes and characteristics, and create a baby that seems to be out of a third-rate medical textbook?
Yeah, I think it's disturbing, I guess, that the same people who often claim to value diversity and all these things are actively trying to produce those that don't have undesirable traits, whatever they deem to be undesirable. So they design what they want to be, and I think it stems from this idea of where we're playing God in our own lives. I can't be surprised, I guess, that's happening, because we do it historically throughout all time. We want to play God. We want to be in control. We want what we think is best. So I guess I can't be shocked that it's happening. It's disturbing that it's happening. And I think ultimately it points to we have a culture that doesn't value life. We have this natural disposition that says there are certain things about some people that are lesser. That means that I want to avoid them. I don't want them here. I want to, whether it's through abortion or medicine or suppression or oppression, or whatever it might be, I want to get less of it. And that's been woven through human history. It's been woven through so many injustices. It's been woven through abortion and other birth control methods for decades and centuries and millennia. It's just now technology has advanced to a place that now it's developing itself or displaying itself in a brand new way, and we need to be equally vocal about this other reckless treatment of human value and human life.
Dr. Miller, tell me more about Rachel's Vineyard. Why am I a Catholic of 56 years and do not know or did not know this healing service and group?
Repeat the question for me.
Tell me more about Rachel's Vineyard.
About what?
Rachel's Vineyard?
Oh, Rachel's Vineyard. Well, it is a post-abortion healing ministry, and it's been around, I think, for decades. The questioner says that they didn't know about it. I don't know why you don't. Rachel's Vineyard, there's another post-abortion healing ministry, and the name the name is escaping me at the moment, but let me put it to you this way. If you didn't know about it, and you know about it now, just go. If you need it, then it's there for you, right? And a lot of these post-abortion healing ministries have been pretty well, I think, promoted. I think even the Archdiocese of Detroit is involved with it. There are chapters, there are retreats that women and men can go on for post-abortion healing. So I don't want you to regret or hang on to why didn't I know? We could go around the block about that all day long. But now that if you do know about it, and however it is that you did find out about it, then if you need it, you know that it's there for you, and you should take advantage of it.
Last question. Trevor, it's a simple one. How can we help you?
So I think that the first thing whenever someone asks us that is that ultimately prayers are the most important for us. We have a really large group of people from across the state that pray for us or serve on like our advisory board that help our organization and are a resource for us. We are a rapidly growing organization as well. We have 10 full-time staff now. If you rewind 7 years ago, it was my wife and I in our living room stuffing envelopes and making homemade posters and things like that. So we're growing a lot, and we would love for you to be a part of that, and I can give you more information on that. But ultimately, it's not really about my organization or anyone else's organization. I just want you guys to get involved in whatever you're passionate about and whatever you need to do to help make abortion no more. It's not necessarily my organization. It can be a plethora of different things that you can get involved with. So if you're interested in doing any of that, I know Dr. Miller and I would both love to talk to you in ways that you can get involved.
So I would like to thank you personally.
I just want to say, if you did have any questions about Red Rose Rescue, we'll be here and happy to talk to you. So thank you. God bless you.
Can I assume both of you will be around after the conference? Okay, so very good. So any questions, please. Can we just give these two a hand? I mean, my gosh, what a On behalf of myself and the staff and the clergy of St. Cyril Methodius and the entire conference staff of sponsors, thank you for attending the 7th Annual Midwest Apologetics Conference. I'm going to close out, but Father Libor is going to come up and give us a blessing. Can we give Father a hand? Because it would not be possible without his approval. So as for me, this conference is ended. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Father?
I did nothing, so you don't have to glorify me. Thanks again to Dr. Miller and Mr. Polo for their words of encouragement and wisdom and insight that definitely help us to understand more and become more aware of the issue of human life and the need to protect it. It is our, first of all, human responsibility and also religious duty as well. Many thanks to all of you who attended this conference. I'm glad you were able to be here at St. Cyril and Methodius. Be sure that this can be your spiritual home, and always feel welcome whenever you are in the area. The Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Praise be to Jesus Christ.